So imagine an accounting firm just, deploying a brand new, highly autonomous artificial intelligence to 250,000 employees overnight.
Right. No beta test.
Exactly. No 5-year phased-in rollout plan. Just, flipping a switch and handing a digital brain to 276,000 people.
Which sounds completely wild.
It does. It sounds like a science fiction pitch, but that actually happened today. So welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah, we have a massive stack of sources for you today.
We really do. We've got technical intelligence digests, infographic design briefs, a cinematic visual production script, all of it dated May 20th, 2026.
And our mission today isn't to just, rattle off a list of product updates.
Right. No one wants that.
Yeah.
We are looking at a monumental shift in the timeline here because the era of the promising AI demo, that's officially over.
It's completely in the rearview mirror now.
Yeah. We are moving at just breakneck speed into the era of shipping at scale.
Yeah, the finish line has completely moved. Because for the last few years, the narrative was entirely about, who had the smartest model in a controlled laboratory setting.
Right, behind closed doors.
Exactly. But now, the competition is about integration, sheer velocity, and perhaps, most surprisingly, exactly where these models are legally permitted to run.
Which is a huge pivot. And we are going to explore what this collision between tech giants, like Google and OpenAI, actually means for everyday teams, for you, the listener, and the people who are actually going to use these tools starting this week.
Let's start with Google, actually, because the story in our technical intelligence digests isn't just what they launched at I/O 2026.
Right, we covered a lot of that preview stuff already.
Yeah, it's not the what, it's the staggering velocity and the immediate availability of this rollout, because they just dropped Gemini 3.5 Flash, and the specs on this are, they're heavy.
They really are. The digest lists a 1 million token context window, 65,000 maximum output tokens, and a 76.2% score on something called the terminal benchmark.
Yeah, that benchmark is key.
But before we get into the availability, let's translate that for a second.
Okay.
Because we hear 1 million tokens thrown around a lot, right? But what does that practically mean for you, the listener, if you're just sitting at a desk trying to get work done?
Well, a token is essentially a fragment of a word, right? So when we say a model has a 1 million token context window, we're really talking about its short-term memory for a single conversation.
Oh, so like it's working memory.
Exactly. It is roughly the equivalent of handing the AI a 3,000-page book. Or, perhaps more relevant to a workspace, an entire company's 10-year email history, code base, and financial records.
Wow. All at once.
All at once. It can hold all of that in its working memory simultaneously without forgetting what was on page 1.
Which is just staggering to think about. But what about that 76.2% on the terminal benchmark? Because we see these percentages constantly. And honestly, without context, 76% just sounds like a C+ on a math test.
Right. Yeah, it sounds mediocre. But think of standard AI benchmarks as simple memory quizzes. They just test if the model can, regurgitate facts.
Okay.
The terminal benchmark is entirely different. It's more like an obstacle course for logic and agentic execution.
Agentic execution meaning it takes actions.
Yeah, exactly. It tests whether a model can be given a high-level goal, encounter unexpected errors on its own, troubleshoot those errors, and then try a new path without a human having to step in and hold its hand.
Oh, wow. So it's actually solving problems in real time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So scoring over 75% on that specific benchmark proves that Gemini 3.5 Flash isn't just a chatbot that talks to you. It's an execution engine. It can do complex, multi-step tasks in the background.
Which makes the availability of this model the real earthquake here, because there is no waitlist.
None.
It is generally available on day one via the API. And I have to say, our infographic sources have this incredibly striking visual direction for how to represent all this compute power.
Oh, I loved that visual brief.
Right. They describe visualizing that 1 million token window as a massive, towering, crystalline prism. It's glowing with this electric blue and deep violet light, and there are thousands of golden threads representing tokens just flowing into it.
It's very dramatic.
It's super dramatic, but it really fits the scale because it feels like Google isn't just updating their software. They are dropping a massive, fully assembled factory right on our front lawn.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
It's like the difference between a car company showing off a futuristic concept car at an auto show versus just handing you the keys to a fleet of delivery trucks that are ready to drive today.
Exactly. That visual of the prism absorbing all those threads perfectly illustrates what is happening. The barrier to entry for massive data processing has just vanished overnight.
And it isn't just text and code either. Alongside Flash, they unveiled Gemini Omni.
Right, their multimodal model.
Yeah, and the visual brief describes Omni as this luminous eye made of layered concentric rings. You've got flowing video frames, audio waveforms, and text lines all moving together. It's their video-first, multimodal powerhouse.
And it's positioned to really take on frontier creative models with true cross-modal editing.
Wait, cross-modal editing, meaning what exactly?
Meaning you aren't just generating a video from a text prompt and crossing your fingers hoping it looks good. You are working fluidly back and forth across text, audio, and video formats.
Oh, so you can tweak the audio, which changes the video, and vice versa.
Exactly. But,
Yeah.
having a massive, powerful model like Flash for Logic or Omni for Video immediately introduces the next major hurdle.
Which is?
Raw computing power is completely useless if it is trapped behind a chat interface.
Right.
If you have to sit there and type instructions line by line, you are still the bottleneck. The real transition we are seeing this week is about how that power is being unleashed to actually push buttons and execute workflows on your behalf.
Okay, yes. That brings us to Gemini Spark. Because Google has launched what our sources describe as a 247 personal AI agent for Workspace and enterprise users.
Yeah, a digital coworker, basically.
Right. And this agent can take autonomous action across core productivity apps. And they didn't just drop the agent, they shipped a Managed Agents API and expanded their anti-gravity agentic development environment.
Which is huge for developers, because for anyone outside of software development, an API is basically a bridge that allows two different pieces of software to talk to each other.
Right, the plumbing.
Exactly, the plumbing. By shipping a Managed Agents API, developers can now build custom agents in secure Google-hosted environments without having to self-manage all that complex back-end plumbing. Google handles the server orchestration, so developers just focus on the logic.
I need to use an analogy here just to make sure I'm fully grasping the shift, because it's a lot.
Go for it.
Okay, think of a traditional AI chatbot, like a brilliant Michelin star chef, but they're chained to a stove. They can answer all your questions about how to make a perfect souffle, but you still have to go to the grocery store, bring them the ingredients, prep the station, and plate the food.
Right. You have to do all the prep work.
Exactly. So what you're saying is that an agentic AI, like Gemini Spark, is basically giving that chef the keys to your car, your credit card, and permission to leave the kitchen. They go buy the groceries, cook the meal, and serve it to you while you're taking a nap.
That is precisely the mechanical difference. The AI has moved from advising on a task to actually executing the task across multiple different environments.
See, here is where I have to push back, though. Because if we are handing the chef the keys and the credit card, I am immediately thinking about the risks.
Yeah, the trust factor is a real concern.
Right. If I have a Gemini Spark agent working 24 hours a day in my workspace, authorized to take autonomous action while I am literally asleep, at what point am I managing the AI, and at what point is the AI managing me? I mean, how is an everyday team supposed to adapt to having a digital coworker operating with that level of autonomy?
It's a fair question, and it really comes down to sandboxing and granular permissions. The anti-gravity environment they expanded is entirely about setting strict operational boundaries.
So it's not a free-for-all.
No, not at all. You aren't giving the agent your master password and telling it to go wild. You are setting up a designated playground, a sandbox, where it is authorized to read specific email labels, draft replies, and maybe push code only to staging environments, but never to live production.
Okay, that makes sense. So there are guardrails.
Heavy guardrails. The system is designed to pause and ping a human for approval before executing any irreversible action, like, moving money or deleting core files. The human is always in the loop at the final toll booth.
So the goal is really to shift the human role from doing the manual labor to simply reviewing and approving the AI's labor.
Exactly. It shifts your job from being the player on the field to being the coach on the sidelines. Let's look at the visual production script in our stack, actually, because it provides a brilliant example of this.
Oh, right, the developer story.
Yeah, it highlights a scenario with a software developer in São Paulo. Picture his workflow before this week. If he wanted to prototype a new application on a Friday night, he had to write all the boilerplate code manually, set up his local testing environment, hunt down basic syntax errors.
That would just eat his entire weekend.
Easily. But now, with a 1 million token context window, he literally just drops his entire existing code base into the model, types a natural language prompt describing the new feature he wants, and then physically watches the app prototype assemble itself in real time on his screen.
Wow, so he just skips all the busy work. A project that used to take a whole weekend turns into, what, a casual Tuesday afternoon task.
Pretty much. Or consider the computer science student in Nairobi mentioned in that same script. She's running a really complex multi-step research workflow.
Okay.
In the past, digesting dozens of conflicting academic papers required massive cognitive load and weeks of manual verification. Using these agentic tools, she tasks the AI to cross-reference the papers, highlight the methodological flaws, and present a synthesized summary.
So it's not learning for her, it's just doing the heavy lifting.
Right. The AI isn't learning the material for her. It is simply clearing the brush so she can focus her human energy on the high-level synthesis.
It paves the road ahead of you so you can drive faster. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
But this massive blanket coverage of Google's cloud brings up a glaring question.
Which is, where does the competition go?
Exactly. If Google is embedding these agents into every corner of the cloud and our workspaces, where does OpenAI go? How do they counterstrike?
They respond by looking at the map, seeing Google's dominance in the cloud, and finding the one massive territory where the cloud simply isn't allowed to go.
Oh, this is fascinating. The intelligence brief outlines this move perfectly. OpenAI partnered with Dell Technologies to deliver Codex, which is their coding model, in hybrid and on-premises enterprise environments.
Yeah, this is a massive pivot.
It's wild. We have spent the last decade fighting tooth and nail to transition every business on Earth into the cloud. And now OpenAI is stepping in and saying, actually, let's take this incredibly powerful artificial brain, take it off the internet, and lock it in a secure box in your company's basement.
They're building secure offline vaults for AI.
It's so counterintuitive.
It is, but the shift from what AI can do to where it runs is the defining battleground for enterprise adoption right now. Because when we talk about shipping at scale, we have to acknowledge the legal reality of massive organization.
Right, compliance issues.
Huge compliance issues. Think about defense contractors handling classified schematics. Think about healthcare networks managing millions of patient records, or highly regulated financial institutions. Legally and practically, they are strictly forbidden from pushing their proprietary, highly sensitive data out into a public cloud environment.
So if the AI revolution only exists in the public cloud, those massive industries are entirely locked out of it.
OpenAI recognized that exact bottleneck. By bringing Codex on-premises via Dell's physical hardware, a highly regulated bank can now utilize state-of-the-art AI for code generation and data analysis without a single line of their intellectual property ever leaving their physical building.
Wow, so they get the power of the frontier model, but with the security of a closed loop.
Exactly. And Anthropic is playing a very similar enterprise game right now, actually.
Oh, right. The Intelligence Digest mentions they just deployed Claude across KPMG's entire workforce, and that is 276,000 employees.
Yeah, it is one of the largest single organization deployments of a frontier AI model we've ever seen. And simultaneously, Anthropic acquired an API tooling startup called Stainless.
API tooling. So again, back to the plumbing.
Yeah, it's all about making it easier for external developers to plug Anthropic's models into their own custom software. This just proves the industry is maturing rapidly, because when you deploy AI to over 250,000 staff members at a Big Four accounting firm, the conversation is no longer about cool parlor tricks.
No, not at all.
It's about absolute ironclad compliance, data security, and reliability.
Well, and speaking of reliability and trust, we have to talk about OpenAI's new content provenance initiative that was mentioned in the sources. Because with tools like Gemini Omni generating incredibly fluid photorealistic video and audio, the line between human-created media and synthetic media is just completely dissolving.
It really is.
Establishing attribution and transparency isn't just a nice feature anymore. It's critical infrastructure for reality itself.
Absolutely. Because when an AI can perfectly mimic a CEO's voice on an earnings call or generate a flawless video of a geopolitical event that never happened, provenance meaning, the digital paper trail of how a piece of media was created, that becomes the only way to maintain trust in digital ecosystems.
Okay, so we have Google blanketing the cloud with this high-velocity availability, and we have OpenAI and Anthropic securing the highly regulated on-premises enterprise space. Big tech companies fighting for infrastructure dominance is a fascinating chess match.
It is.
But we need to look at what this actually means for you. How does this clash of infrastructure trickle down to the individual learner or the small business owner or the creative professional who's just trying to navigate their week?
Well, the infrastructure wars are enabling entirely new categories of personal software. Tools built on massive context windows and agentic execution are hitting the market immediately, and it's fundamentally altering how everyday knowledge work gets done.
Our sources highlight two specific tools that illustrate this beautifully. So the first one is Honan version 1.2. And this tool takes your raw, messy files, like your half-written notes, chaotic voice memos, or even just a loose brainstorm, and it structures them into a polished, shareable learning experience, complete with modules and quizzes.
And this is huge because the challenge with early AI writing tools was the homogenization of voice.
Oh, totally.
We have all read an AI-generated email or article. It has that very specific, bland, frictionless tone that just screams generic AI filler.
Yeah, it strips all the humanity right out of the text.
Exactly. But the massive context windows in these new models solve that problem. Because Honan 1.2 can hold 1 million tokens of your past writing in its memory, it doesn't just structure your course, it actively mimics your distinct cadence, your vocabulary quirks, and your specific teaching style.
Wow.
Yeah, it takes your raw expertise and packages it without diluting your unique human voice.
That is so cool. And the second tool highlighted is called Littlebird. And this addresses a pain point that I know every single listener has experienced. It's described as a context-aware memory layer.
Yeah, think about the friction of a standard workday, right? You vaguely remember a Slack thread from 3 weeks ago where a colleague mentioned a specific metric, or there's an email chain buried in your inbox that had a crucial PDF attached.
Ugh, yes. And you spend 20 minutes frantically digging through folders, trying different search keywords, and losing your train of thought completely.
It is the absolute bane of modern digital work.
Yeah.
The sheer amount of time wasted looking for things we already have.
Yes.
So Littlebird solves this by acting as a silent background index. It creates a personal knowledge graph of your workday conversations, your documents, your project context, and it doesn't require you to manually tag files or organize neat little folders.
Oh, thank goodness.
Right. When you need that metric from 3 weeks ago, it just retrieves the exact snippet of information instantly.
So your digital coworker essentially becomes an extension of your own memory, just retrieving what you forgot right when you need it, which actually brings us to a story in our briefing that perfectly synthesizes this entire shift.
The logistics story.
Yes, because we've talked a lot about digital workflows and software tools, but this massive compute power is now colliding directly with the messy reality of the physical world. So our intelligence brief notes an ongoing supply chain disruption. And just reporting neutrally on the sources here, fresh warnings from Washington over Iran have spooked Gulf markets.
Right.
And that's put upward pressure on oil futures, which are currently sitting at $108.67. Fears are mounting over potential disruptions to the Strait of Hormuz, which is this massive global choke point that carries roughly 20% of the world's global oil transit. And we are looking purely at the logistical reality of this situation here, because geopolitical tension ripples out immediately into global freight costs.
Exactly. The cost of moving physical goods skyrockets when shipping lanes are threatened. Which brings us to the bakery owner in Detroit that was outlined in our visual script.
Let's look at her Friday morning. She runs a small business in Detroit, and she suddenly faces a massive spike in freight costs for the 200 kilograms of bread flour she needs delivered by next week.
And that kind of spike is devastating.
It is. The geopolitical disruption halfway across the world is eating directly into her razor-thin profit margins. Now, a few years ago, resolving this would have been an absolute nightmare. She would have had to pull up massive spreadsheets, spend hours on the phone with different logistics brokers, manually calculate fuel surcharges.
And likely just absorb the financial hit because she didn't have the time or leverage to negotiate a better route.
Right. But because of the infrastructure shift we have been detailing today, she has access to an AI-powered logistics tool built on these new frontier models.
And she doesn't need to be a supply chain expert to use it.
It's not at all. She sits down at her kitchen table, opens the interface, and just types a plain English prompt. Find me the cheapest reliable route for 200 kilograms of bread flour from my supplier to Detroit by Friday. And according to the script, the AI takes exactly 4 seconds to digest the shifting global shipping data, cross-reference the rising fuel costs, compare a dozen freight carriers, and automatically reroute her shipment around the disrupted corridors.
And it secures a new rate that saves her 11%.
Which is incredible. The contrast is staggering. Hours of manual, stressful calculation replaced by 4 seconds of background execution.
Yeah, the true impact of this week's shift is found in that kitchen in Detroit. We can easily get lost in the scale of the technology, right? The 1 million token limits, the hundreds of thousands of enterprise deployments, the crystalline prisms of data.
Yeah, the sci-fi stuff.
Exactly. But the reality is hyper-local. Google's massive product velocity and OpenAI's push to secure on-premises enterprise environments, it all cascades down to the end user. It empowers the developer prototyping code in São Paulo, the student synthesizing research in Nairobi, and the bakery owner protecting her margins in Detroit. The AI has ceased to be a novelty you tinker with. It has become an ambient, integrated utility that actively amplifies what you can achieve today.
We started this deep dive talking about the difference between looking at a futuristic concept car at an auto show and being handed the keys to a fully fueled delivery truck.
Right.
Well, the trucks have officially arrived on our front lawns, and they're already driving themselves. So as you go about your week, I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. If tools like Littlebird are silently indexing every brilliant idea you have ever forgotten, and agents like Gemini Spark are authorized to navigate your workspace and take action on your behalf 24 hours a day, what happens to the very concept of work?
It's a huge question.
It really is. When your AI remembers every detail you have ever ignored and flawlessly executes the tedious manual tasks you used to dread, what is left for you to do other than simply dream up the next prompt? Thank you for joining us in this deep dive. Stay curious, keep exploring, and we'll catch you next time.